And we're back for episode 99 of Catfish on Ice. This is Chad Mitten, your host, and we're being joined by Hart of Puckpedia. He has come back for another edition of Catfish on Ice. He joined us at the early days of the podcast in episode 6. We're now at episode 99, so we're really thrilled to have him back, part of Puckpedia.com, runs Puckpedia.com. Welcome back, Hart. How have you been?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
For sure. How's this season treating you so far? I know it's been a pretty wild, interesting season for the NHL this year.
Yeah, it's busy. I mean, whenever there's COVID absences and then the emergency exception call ups and just a lot of action. It's not as fun
Yeah.
as, new contracts or trades. It's a lot of work to keep up with all the roster moves happening every day and kind of the complicated situations.
Yeah, they brought back the taxi squad or whatever, and I'm sure that made things complicated on your end, having to figure out how to work out all that stuff for each team.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, more work. Yeah, like I said, if it's busy with signings and trades, that's more fun. I mean, trying to keep track of all the guys going up and down isn't nearly as fun or exciting, but you need to do it to make sure the site's updated. So, but I
Absolutely. Well,
can't wait to just deal with normal call ups and sending down and not COVID absences and stuff. So.
I can tell you that on Catfish on Ice, we rely on Puckpedia.com for a lot of the stuff that we're looking at when we discuss on certain episodes. So thank you so much for all your work. That's why we wanted to have you on for another episode. So let's talk first here about the elephant in the room for a lot of Predators fans. And I think it's going to be a really major storyline this upcoming offseason if he is still unsigned and he actually ends up being unrestricted free agent, and that is Filip Forsberg, who is perfectly having what you call a contract year type of season. He is just really balling out right now, having one of the best seasons of his career. So I just got to ask you, I know you don't just follow the Predators and you've got a lot on your plate, but just from the outside looking in, Hart, what do you think about Filip Forsberg if he does end up becoming an unrestricted free agent? Do you think the Predators should back up the Brinks truck and figure out a way to get him signed, or just what's your initial thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's important to have the homegrown guys that have spent most of their career with the team stay. I think it says a lot to the fans. It says a lot to the players on the team. They see a guy that's been there re-up and stay, and I think it has a big impact on the organization. And I think that's why you often see, these guys. Look at Landeskog last year. Hang around. Maybe it even gets into like UFA territory, but it's hard for both the team and the player to walk away. So I would be surprised if he left. But these things, they're not that simple. They have to make it work. But I would put my money on him returning. Just not with any inside information. Just that's how these things typically go.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely what Predators fans want to hear for sure, because I'm telling you, seeing him go is going to be really hard on this organization because, like you said, he is homegrown, and the Predators as a franchise, have always had a hard time. Well, technically Forsberg isn't homegrown. He did come
Yeah.
in through a trade, but he's pretty much been here since he played
That
his.
was a robbery. He came in through a robbery. So.
Yes, he's played every single NHL game of his career with the Predators. So even though he's technically not homegrown, it's still easy to call him that. But yeah, it'd be hard to see him go because the Predators have always had a hard time bringing up elite talent forwards on their team. They've always been good at getting defensemen. They've always been good at goaltending. But the forwards they've always had a hard time finding those great forwards. So, all right. I mean, he's making $6 million right now, I believe, which I feel like that's a little underpaid. So he's definitely going to get a pay raise. What do you think he's worth? Do you think he's like, just off the top of your head, do you think he's like a $7 million player, an $8 million player? Where do you think he lands?
Well, I mean, first of all, what we've seen now in the last couple of years is you kind of have to throw out all the contracts pre-COVID with different salary cap levels, right? And one of the benefits, I guess, of a flat cap is now like we have a couple of years where the contracts are all comparable. You don't have to try to look at it like percentage of the cap. So, if we just really look at the last 2 years, I mean, you've got Landeskog at 7 million. He went to the open market so that's pretty close to market value, you'd think. You got Kreider at 6.5. Again, those were UFA contracts.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Buchnevich signed as a RFA, but it covered some UFA years at 5.8. Reinhart 6.5, again covered So it was an RFA contract, but covered some UFA years. So I think you're probably in the 6 to 7 range. But the thing is, when you get out to the open market, it's an auction, and
Yep.
anything can happen. And it'll really
Mm.
depend what's left on the market. So, right now, actually, there's a decent crop of UFA forwards, probably better than we've seen in previous years. But again, you never know what's going to happen by the time we get to free agency. But right now, we've got, speaking of having a good contract here, Nazem Kadri at age 31 and having a career year. That's a good
Yes.
payday.
Oh.
And then, like we've got Johnny Gaudreau, Pavelski, Hurdle's going to probably be the biggest paid
Mhm.
UFA, and Claude Giroux. So, you'll have to see if some of those deals get done first, or if they're all going to hit the open market, and then you kind of have to rank Forsberg in with who's left. Like, who do you think is going to get paid more, Johnny Gaudreau or Forsberg? I mean, Gaudreau's had kind of better production, but I think teams really like that bigger body
Mhm.
a little more. So maybe you call it kind of even, and so we'd have to see what happens with him too. So it'll be an interesting market, but I
Interesting.
think your instinct of kind of the 6 to 7 range is probably about right. But
All
it
right.
only takes, when you're buying a house or a UFA forward, you just need like one other person to like the person or the house a lot, and it gets the bidding up.
Mhm.
So
And it's also all about the length. I mean,
yeah.
I would go ahead and venture to say that Forsberg's camp wants a long-term deal, so that also goes into it. And David Poyle, the GM for the Predators, has had some bad luck with long-term contracts in recent memory. So the thought of a long-term contract can definitely scare some people. All right,
But he is
guys.
he is 27. He's not like 29 or
Yes,
30, right? And
true.
if Landeskog took an 8-year deal at 28, I mean,
Mhm.
I think Forsberg, you're talking maybe 6 at the shortest, but you're probably
Yeah,
7 or 8.
yeah.
And what we've seen with some contracts this last year too is teams going 8 even though they know it's too long just to get the AV lower, right? And
Mhm.
I mean, Poyle's maybe a different situation since he's been there forever, but usually you think the attitude of the GM is like, well, those last few years were someone else's problem, not mine. So
Mm.
we saw a lot of deals, yeah, that kind of stretch out to 7 or 8 years just to lower that cap hit. And so maybe, you kind of have to look at maybe the cap hit on a Forsberg is lower than we think, but it's 8 years, and you kind of have to take the total dollars divided by 5 or 6 to see what his true cap it was, and then it's like they kind of just extended it out to lower it.
Hmm. So let's kind of look at just overall the Preds' current cap situation. I checked out your site today, and projected cap space, it says here around about 10.8 million projected cap space. Kind of, what do you think about the Predators in terms of their cap situation? Are they set up to be some big spenders here, maybe in the upcoming off season? How are they looking right now in your opinion?
Yeah, well, like they have a huge amount of cap space right now, like just massive. So that 10.8 million, that's what they're projected to finish the year with. But we just passed the halfway point in the year, which means that they could add 23 million of cap hit right now, and that they would still be under the cap. When you get to the trade deadline, that's 54 million of cap hit they could add,
Wow,
if they don't do anything between now and then. So that's
wow,
basically like unlimited amount of cap space, right? Like you couldn't possibly spend that much.
yeah.
And just like looking at where they rank, like they're only Buffalo, Columbus, Ottawa, Detroit have more cap space. So, I don't know. You'd have a better sense of like what ownership wants to spend, but like I look at a team that has that kind of cap space, whether they're good or bad. I would say there's an opportunity to get some assets by being involved in other teams' trades or taking on some bad contracts because, you get to the trade deadline, you only have to pay 20% of what's left on a contract. So let's say, I don't know, let's throw it out there, a Marc-Andre Fleury or someone else with the big number, a Hurdle or someone,
Hmm.
right? The Preds, if they retain, let's say, a million of cap hit, that's like 200 grand of cash. What kind of asset could they get for it? Last year, we saw about 400 or 500 grand of cap hit going for like a fourth round pick. So if you cover that or double that, can you get a third or fourth round pick? I mean, to me, if the ownership has the money, it's like almost criminal not to take advantage of that and use that cash to do something. Same with some bad contracts, right? Like to take even if you take a $5 million dog contract that's up at the end of this year, that's $1 million,
Hmm.
but for the trade deadline to the end of the year. It's not nothing, but
Yeah.
What do you get for $1 million dog contract,
When
right?
you've got, and especially when you've got that kind of space like you're talking about.
Exactly. And then you look at like the outlook for next year. So, they're right now they're looking like they're going to have 27 million for next year, before signing Forsberg. And that's not with like a full roster. That's with 14 guys. So they'd have to fill out the roster, but they have lots of room. I mean, they're going to need a backup goalie, right? They're going to need a couple depth defensemen,
Mm-hmm.
and replace Forsberg. Give Luke Kunin needs another contract, and that's really it. So
Yeah.
they've got lots of space. So again, you'd have a better sense of what ownership and management is willing to spend, but they have so much room. They're good. And I think it seemed like the team was winding down towards a rebuild. But I mean, you look at the Rangers, they were kind of in the same spot, and then they had lots of cap space. They went after and they got a Panarin, and they got some bigger guys, right? Or maybe they went for some they could go for some RFAs where the team can't really afford to give them the big raise. Like it's similar to what happened with Buchnevich, right? Where the Rangers traded him to St. Louis because they thought they needed the cap space. So Nashville has a lot of options, and if I was a fan of the team, I'd want to see them use it. I mean, you can't take the cap space home with you like for next year, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
whether they do something to add for this year or they get involved in basically getting paid for their cap space, you think they should do something with it.
Yeah, I mean they're in a great situation right now because as you just alluded to, they were expected to be like a sixth or seventh place team in their division, and I mean there's still half a season left, so it's a clustered up division, of course, but yeah, I mean things are all looking great for them, and they've got all this spending power, so yeah, it's a good situation to be in.
And here's an idea to throw at you, just as like an example. So Yaroslav Halak with Vancouver, he is scheduled, if he gets a 10 full games played, or 10 games where he's played more than 30 minutes, he'll get a $1.25 million performance bonus, and he gets another $250,000 bonus if his save percentage is over a certain level. If Vancouver has him for that and keeps him this year, they're over the cap because they're using LTIR. That's all going to be a carryover overage for next year. So that's 1.5 million Vancouver is going to have for next year just for keeping him. If they trade him to Nashville, yeah, and he hits those targets, yeah, Nashville's going to have to pay that. But they're paying it this year. They're not going to have to pay it next year.
Hmm.
So what's that worth to Vancouver to save potentially like, $1.5 million for next year?
Yeah.
So maybe you can get him, and he's a good goalie. Like he's having a good season, Halak.
Hmm.
Give yourself some insurance and net. Maybe you trade Riddick for another asset, right? Like that's the kind of thing that a team with cap space can do if
They
they're
got a
willing to
lot of
spend a little
power.
bit of money. Yeah.
They got a lot of leverage and a lot of power for sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's look over the entire NHL now because we're less than 2 months from the trade deadline. I'll trade deadline is some of my favorite time of the year for hockey. I mean, obviously I love watching the games, I love the playoffs, all that stuff, but the trade deadline stuff, I just can't get enough of it. I love seeing all the trade rumors, everyone's out there throwing out their own trade ideas. I just can't get enough of it. So just kind of tell me what you're thinking about this year's trade deadline. Some top targets out there that are standing out that might end up getting moved. I mean, I've seen some pretty good lists out there from some NHL analysts or whatever, but just kind of give me your sense of the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trade deadline is always exciting, and the speculation is usually kind of more fun than what actually happens. It can often
Yeah.
be a letdown, although I'd like to see like the big surprise thing sometimes, right? That you're
Mhm.
not expecting. I think one thing will be interesting to watch with the goalies. Like Edmonton, for example, desperately needs a goalie. There's some other teams that would maybe like to bolster their goaltending depth. There's some teams that I think need goaltending to just have a somewhat competitive lineup, even if they're out of the playoff picture. And there's some teams that have some extra goaltending, but for now, they want to keep them and see how things go, but they're not going to need to keep them, past the deadline. So let's like a guy like Marc-Andre Fleury is obviously the top name. You got a Corpusalo in Columbus, who's actually had several horrible seasons, but his name always seems out there. So,
Yeah.
see what he goes for. But for me, yeah, it's like there's some really good pending UFAs, and those are the ones to often get moved. So, like right now, you'd expect Johnny Gaudreau is going to stay because they're doing really well. But let's say Calgary starts to slide, like what do they do there? Can they re-up him or not?
Mhm.
Pavelski in Dallas, right? Like,
Yeah.
is he? I don't know if he's part of the long-term future there at his age. And
Mhm.
it's hard to tell with the standings right now because of all the games in hand and what that might mean. But,
Yep.
if Dallas isn't really in it in 2 months, because the trade deadline's not for 2 months still, right? So if Dallas
Yeah.
isn't really in it, do they move a Pavelski? I think Hurdle, again, San Jose sort of seems in it, but you could see when teams start catching up and games played, they slide out of it. Like that would be a big name to go. I think Giroux is definitely going to be someone that's talked about and potentially moved, and he could really help someone. I mean, he's got the same, he's got this pretty much the same points as Forsberg in a few more games, right? So he's
Yep.
someone that can definitely chip in. Yeah, I mean, and then what's Vegas going to do if they don't have anyone injured when Eichel's ready? They're going to have to trade somebody to free up that cap space. So,
Yeah.
does Riley Smith get traded? What's going to happen there? So,
Yeah, they're
I think there's
definitely
a
gonna
lot
have
of
to make some
names.
moves. Yeah,
Yeah,
Vegas is definitely gonna have to make some moves, for sure. Pavelski's an interesting one for me. I think he would be a really good addition for a team who's trying to get over the playoff hump. If they're in the hunt right now, because he's been a proven clutch performer in the playoffs in the past in his career. I would love to add a Pavelski.
Yeah, he's over a point per game this year too at age 37, right? So
It's
you don't
pretty
have to
amazing. Yeah.
usually these guys at that age, you're like, "Oh, can they kind of get it together for a playoff run?" But I mean, you could see he's still performing, like a much younger guy. So yeah, you wouldn't be so worried about him.
And then another guy out there that's been getting some talks on the Dallas Stars is John Klingberg.
Yep.
They're trying to say that he's not happy with his situation, that he wants to be traded out of Dallas. His ice time's been going down. So that's another player I'm really interested to see where he ends up going. And I don't think it's realistic, but he would be a great addition for the Predators, who could use some extra defensive depth.
Yeah, I
And
mean, and
he wouldn't be a depth player. He would definitely be a top two pairing. I'm just saying he would definitely be a huge help for the Predators.
and what does Anaheim do with their defensemen if they're in the mix or not, right? Like Hampus
Mhm.
Lindholm, Manson, some more forwards to think about, like Columbus with Max Domi, right? Like he's really up and down, but he can really get hot, and you think he's someone that a playoff team would be interested in. Talking about defensemen, still you've got Mark Giordano with Seattle, PK Subban potentially, right? Like, what does he have left? He could certainly, you think, help a playoff team if they're a little need some help on D. And who could take that kind of cap hit on? I mean, I don't know if it's reunions in the in
Oh
in
my
the
gosh.
in the offering, but
Hart,
I mean, Nashville has the cap space, or maybe Nashville gets involved to help retain and broker a trade like that, right?
if the Predators brought back PK Subban, it would probably break Pred's Twitter full day.
They'd be happy or not happy.
I think a lot of people would actually like it. PK Subban was pretty loved here in Nashville when he was here. He fit the city perfectly. Like we loved him here. So that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool. All right, Hart, it's been awesome having you back, man. We will try not to go so many episodes before having you back again, because it's always a lot of fun, a lot of good information from you. So have a great rest of the season. Thanks for joining us for episode 99. All right, man.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. This has been episode 99 of Catfish on Ice with Chad Mitten and Rich Howe. Be sure to join us later this week for episode 100. We will be doing our listener appreciation episode, so can't wait for that. Everyone have a great week. See you later.